with the 22nd of April, and it's 7:45 a.m. and I'm preparing my breakfast, and I use this as an opportunity to talk normally because when I make structured videos with either a plan or when I show books, it's really exhausting intellectually and physically because I have to move around an enormous amount of books in a very tiny space. That's okay, but it's exhausting. It's more exhausting intellectually than physically. So I assume that when I record these kind of videos, the people who watch this, they are interested in my content and they broadly know what I talk about. So I don't have to do the formal presentation over and over. It's a little bit exhausting. So yeah, I intend to talk about. I share my thoughts, but I was thinking about the state, any state, I would say the concept, the institution that the state is. The books that I've been reading more intensely recently, Jeff Deist and Mr. Byron, and I intend to spend the time reading this book, To Live Without Money, the First Step Towards Self-Sufficiency. Because actually, in case it's not clear, I identify politically as a libertarian, which the purpose is precisely the abolition of politics, but I don't really care about the money. To be a libertarian doesn't mean to want to become rich. I mean, of course, a lot of people who are interested in money, if they are not corrupt socialists who use their power, money and influence to buy politicians, they happen to be libertarians. So among the wealthy, there are a significant proportion of socialists because they want to socialize the losses, one might say. But also, libertarianism attracts wealthy individuals, of course, because they are interested in their property. And I have no moral problem, really. Here, the rich in France, in France, with people, from the perspective of French culture. I'm not talking about high culture. I'm talking about the Geist, the spirit in a way of the people. It's true that in certain part of society, having wealth is considered to be dirty. Here, that's really a sick mentality in the negative sense, because the French, they have a problem. I caricature. It's not true for all French people, but money is kind of a taboo subject in France. That's kind of more or less true. And the French, they complain about the people who have money, but they don't complain about the politicians, not individual politicians, but the very structure of politics, and the fact that politicians, they make a living by stealing through coercion and systematized theft. All the politicians, even the well-intentioned, the honest ones, one might say, and even the competent politicians, they make a living by coercing indirectly the people, whereas the entrepreneurs and the businessmen, they make money. If they are not crony capitalists, if they are not in bed with big government, they make money by providing customers with goods and services that they value. It's a very simple distinction, but actually it makes a lot of sense. But all politicians, even if they were genuine, authentic, competent, dedicated, etc., and some of them, it happens, there are competent, honest politicians, but a politician nonetheless makes money by stealing the money from the community. And politicians, they cannot create value. They can only redistribute value which has already been created, or destroy value by implementing fake policy. Here, the libertarians, they are really clear-minded. Yeah, so the people who complain about the rich, the capitalists, it's very annoying, because they don't complain about the fact that there are an entire class of people who make a living by stealing from society, basically. And the politicians, they can only maintain their power by turning the people into a mass of worthless, dependent, helpless people, one might say. Yeah. So, about the state as an institution and libertarians. Collectivized education turns people into idiots for inherent reason, because every monopoly, that's a fundamental law of economics, every monopoly is counterproductive, because there is no incentive to improve, there is no connection between input and output, there are no signs for losses and profits. So a monopolist, he doesn't know if he performs or not, and he doesn't even need to know, because he's the only provider in town, so he can steal the money. Whereas in a competitive market, here I'm talking about education, where it's valid for all, the businesses, they compete with one another, with other businesses as well, to provide value for customers, and if they do not provide value, they lose market shares, and eventually they do not turn a profit, they make losses, and it means that they are not efficient. They can measure through economic gains the efficiency of their use of inputs and resources. So they are constantly being informed, if it has not been too distorted by subsidies, regulations, tariffs, prohibitions, legislations, etc. If it's more or less a free market, they are constantly being informed of the value in terms of economic measure, one might say, the value or lack thereof that they bring to customers, so they can always improve. The state has no economic rationality, because the state doesn't have to turn a profit or even to balance the budget. They can just borrow money at interest rates, which will be a burden for future taxpayers and future generations. Yeah, so the state is ontologically inefficient from an economic standpoint for all the aspects. And Hans Hermann Hoppe, he applies this to security as well. He explains that a monopoly on security will bring about less and less safety and higher costs, and he's been proven correct empirically. So what Hoppe does, I simplify, but in his theoretical work, is to delegitimize the remnant of state legitimacy, because the state used to be considered as the provider of law and order, and he demonstrates theoretically that the curse of monopoly applies to the state as well, because the services, they tend to degrade in quality, justice, protection, security, etc., order, and the prices tend to increase. Yeah. But about education, collectivized education, it turns people into idiots, culturally, one might say, and the people who go to private schools, de facto, it doesn't mean that they will be more intelligent, because it depends also of the IQ and the willingness to work on the part of the individual and the willingness to learn, etc. But overall, private schools, they offer much better services simply because they have to compete for customers. Yeah. I will go check my potatoes. Yeah. So, yeah. So the people, they are being turned into idiots by state education, and then they are being deceived by state-sponsored media, either directly or indirectly through lobbies, subsidies, through whatever, crony capitalist media, whatever. So they are being dumped down for at least 15 years in developed countries by state-sponsored education. Then they are being manipulated and deceived by the media. Then they are being seduced and brainwashed and corrupted by the politicians who promise them free stuff. So the educational system, the media, the politicians, the mindset of most people in developed societies, they are filled with ideas spread by these free groups. And the scholars, those who read books, they read books written by intellectuals or scholars who are on the same ideological wavelength. That's why I'm not a populist, because I don't trust the people for the aforementioned reasons. Individuals from the people, no problem. That's why I'm an individualist, because talking rationally to individuals, that's okay. But talking to groups, because precisely the people, as a mass, has been turned into idiots, I don't trust the people. I distrust slightly less, but actually no, because the people, they are easily influenced by demagogues. That's what leftist politicians do. And here it includes even the Germans of the past century. They kind of manipulated a little bit the people, it has to be acknowledged. And in this sense, from a philosophical perspective, a philosopher is opposed to propaganda and to state-controlled media apparatus on intellectual grounds. So yeah, politicians or political movements, they can be slightly less corrupt morally than others, but politics, when you think seriously, politics as such is a problem, because it's mass indoctrination and incorporation in groupthink and I watched briefly yesterday. First I will take care of the potatoes. Now I have to cook eggs. I just take a couple of minutes. Yeah. So, what was I saying? Yeah, I watched, I think yesterday, an interview by Mr. Trump. And of course, I respect Trump for his honesty, integrity, charisma, and yeah, he's much more respectable than 97% of politicians in the West, because when Trump competed for presidency, I think in 2016, 97% of the media, they were opposed to Trump. Which is kind of very suspicious, but the reason that people are not, they do not react, the fact that all the media, whatever their political inclinations, they are all opposed to one candidate who is just a person who seeks to defend the interest of his country, it's very suspicious. But yeah, so Trump, he's respectable in many regards as an individual, but the problem here, I understand the criticism of libertarians and some right-wing circles, is that it's a symptom For America, it's not okay to have a strong man. For those decadent continental Europeans, we are used to this. But the Americans, they are not supposed to be led by a politician, no matter how honest or competent he might be, because America is not supposed to be a country where the people become so helpless and dependent that they have to rely on a politician to solve their problems. That's what happens when the Roman Republic became decadent. There were demagogues and populists, sometimes in a good sense. Caesar, he was on the side of the people and he was very competent. But Rome had already become a mob city. The people, the classical Romans, they were capable of ruling themselves. They had, when the Republic had already degenerated on most aspects, that's when the strong men started to rise, starting in the 1st century with Sulla, the guy who professionalized the army. I forgot his name, but then there was Sulla, then Pompey, Caesar, etc., and eventually the empire. I don't blame the people, because it's much better to rely on an honest politician than on a bunch of corrupt bureaucrats. But still, the Americans, they are not supposed to be dependent on a strong man. This is antithetical with the idea and the ideal of this country. Yeah. Another remark about politicians. First, I'll just... My breakfast is ready. Potato, eggs, lentilles, I don't know how you call this in English. These are for the proteins. Here this is muesli. Everything is organic. Orange juice, freshly pressed orange juice. A little bit of cheese. I'm not sure that the cheese is organic, but it's bought at a small shopkeeper. Milk, organic. Bread, organic. And maybe an apple. Yeah. Since I've started eating German breakfasts a few months ago, I had already been doing this in some moments in my life, so it's not new, but now I will do this consistently as long as I can, because if you eat a German heavy, which here it means a heavy breakfast, you will have more energy for the rest of the day. The people who do not eat in the morning, usually women, or I used to do this at some moment because when I worked, I just drank coffee, but it's unhealthy. It's wrong physiologically in terms of diet. So yeah. The problem that I have with politics is that a lot of people in the West have become completely helpless, and they fall prey to the promises of demagogues. And a libertarian, he just wants to be able to live his own life without being burdened by collectivist legislation. And the most libertarian country in the world, historically the United States, built on a libertarian principle. That's not how it was called. Maybe the founders did not even have the consciousness of this, but although they partly had, but it's here, libertarian is just a name, but an ideal of liberty. The country which was founded upon the idea of liberty became, in a very short historical time span, the greatest nation on earth. It's not enough, because I bought books about Liberia, the African country founded by freed slaves. Well, free institutions, or the ideal of freedom is not enough. Yeah, there are other factors, of course, the Anglo-Saxons, the natural resources, etc., etc. But wherever the Anglo-Saxons settled and instituted free institutions, their countries thrived. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, even South Africa for whites. For a long time, it was thriving economically, etc. Yeah. And here I make a remark about the Anglo-Saxons. I went to the high school French educational system as an individual, like a normal curriculum. I dropped out, I think, before turning 17, and I remember class lessons in English, and they talked already, it was around 2007, 2008, 2009. The topics being discussed, of course, Obama, the apartheid in South Africa, yeah, and maybe the natives of India, the natives of America or of Australia, I don't remember exactly, but basically it's anti-racist classes. And then I dropped out of high school. I spent many years, more than 10 years, studying books. No, not more than 10 years, but well, I spent a lot of time, many years, reading books while being socially isolated. And then in 2020, I briefly resumed studying, because I had no high school diploma and I wanted to become a productive member of society, so I needed a diploma. So I resumed studies, high school studies for adults, and there were courses of English, of course, and then again, so it was just a couple of years ago. So I had already cleared my views on some historical, political, scientific topics, but the ideology, of course, is woke in a way. That's not how it's called, but actually that's the woke ideology. But I could see through the fog, one might say, and the classes about English. Of course, English is being taught, but the cultural aspect. What we studied was the Caribbeans, black Caribbeans, the Native Americans, how they were persecuted in a way by the white settlers, the Caribbeans who moved to England, and the Irish, because historically the Irish, they are white, of course, but they have been persecuted more or less by the English. So that's just what I want to say, that when, here that's an example from French educational system, when it comes to studying the English or the Anglo-Saxons, we only study, from the cultural aspect, we only study the victims of the Anglo-Saxon, the natives of America, black slaves or former slaves, and the Irish. But we don't hear anything about the Anglo-Saxons as such. Only indirectly through the negative, the negative consequences of their actions for others. But of course, and that was already the case. So it still is the case in the educational system nowadays. But it was already the case almost 15 years ago, and probably even 20 years ago. We don't hear anything about the political history of England, the Magna Carta, the Glorious Revolution, the ideal of liberty, parliamentary monarchy, the scientific contributions of the English throughout the centuries, the philosophical contributions, the innovators, the inventors, the influence of the Anglo-Saxon upon the Industrial Revolution, the political achievements of England, etc. We see only the negative aspect of their interactions with other groups. Yeah. And here I see the deception, because the Irish, it's okay in the modern world to have an Irish identity, because the Irish, historically, they have been the victims of the English. So the Irish, the problem from the perspective of the system is that they are white, but the solution is that they have been oppressed by other whites. So yeah, that's the same goes with the Italians in America. It's okay to be an Irish American or an Italian American, because historically they have been oppressed by the WASP, basically. Yeah. And here, the French patriots or nationalists, they adopt the same strategy, and the bully is either the Anglo-Saxons, again, the English or the Americans, or the Germans, of course. When white people, when white people of Europe especially, yeah, when continental Europeans, when they run out of ideas, they just blame the Germans. Oh, we don't know what to do, let's blame the Germans. What would you do without the Germans? Yeah, that's a good joke. When whites, non-German whites, when they are not really inspired, they blame the Germans. The Germans, well, when it's difficult, they blame the Jews, and the Jews, they blame, not all of them, but they tend to blame whites. So whites blame the Germans they blame the Jews they blame all whites, and the circle continues, the cycle. No, but seriously about the Anglo-Saxons, really in English classes, almost not a word about the achievements of the Anglo-Saxons. Only the negative aspects. It has been consistent throughout the educational system over the years and the decades. So, yeah. And here, the victim mentality. The far-right French Catholics, they blame the Anglo-Saxons because, in their perspective, the French Catholics, they were civilized, they wanted to spread Christianity, etc., etc. Whereas those barbarian Anglo-Saxons, they killed the Indians, etc., etc. It's partly true. It's partly true, but there's no problem. I mean, of course, it has to be acknowledged. Scientific integrity and honesty has to. I'm not for an ideological view of history. The crimes of the Anglo-Saxons, like the crimes of Europeans during colonization, etc., they have to be acknowledged scientifically. It has happened, and it has to be acknowledged. It has to be self-criticism. Sometimes it was in response of aggression. Sometimes it was a little bit excessive. It has to be acknowledged. But what I'm denouncing is not the fact that they say this, because when it's true, of course it's true, but they use the victim card. So the right-wing French Catholics, not all of them, but they play the victim against the Anglo-Saxons to gain the moral high ground. So they function like most other white people with the virtue signaling and then moral, psychological warfare tactics to gain moral superiority. That's the weak attacking the strong. The French, in comparison with the Anglo-Saxons, historically they have been weak, especially over the past 3 centuries. So they attack the strong, but they don't understand that a lot of non-whites that some right-wingers complain about, they use the same psychological tactics against most whites. That's Nietzschean psychology. The weak against the strong. The weak, he blames the strong for being immoral, greedy, all the vices from the perspective of the weak associated with the strong. Assertion, it becomes arrogance. The will to improve, it becomes greed. The will to expand, it becomes imperialist, etc., etc. So, yeah. And white people, because I know a lot about their psychology, they use this against the Anglo-Saxons and against the Germans, if they are not Anglo-Saxons or German, of course. Yeah, I want you to talk about politics. Politics is a waste of time, a waste of energy. There are so many things in the world, in life, which are infinitely more interesting than politics. Yeah. Okay, 35 minutes. I will finish maybe my muesli with milk. I don't know what to say. I mean, I could talk, but I don't want to start a long self-talk. I will talk about education. The totality of world knowledge is made available on the internet for anyone with an internet connection, and Mr. Deist, he understands this. He says so somewhere. Yeah. And here, that's a problem maybe only for myself as an individual, but I understood in 2013, so 10 years ago, that basically, it's not that I understood, but I realized that I had missed an opportunity by dropping out of high school. There were psychological reasons, it's not really relevant to express this as such, but I realized that I had missed an opportunity and I wanted to compensate by acquiring knowledge, a culture, a scientific culture, a literary culture, by becoming educated, self-educated eventually. And for me, something which is self-evident, I've already said this in a video maybe a few days ago, I don't know, but for me it's self-evident that once you leave whatever school or university or college, not necessarily every minute of every leisure or free time that you have, but a significant proportion of leisure time that you have, you ought to spend studying and improving yourself. And that's what I've been doing. But the problem is that if you do this constantly, you have no friend and no social life. So it cannot be universalized rigorously. So maybe that's why I tend to be a little bit excessive, but actually, people who have leisure. Here, leisure means not having to work or to do the household task. And even with the internet, even when you do the laundry, wash the dishes, prepare the meal, you can listen to very intelligent podcasts. You can if you do not have the focus to watch a video, you can listen to the sound. There are radio shows, intelligent ones on the internet, etc. So, except the people really who are burdened by very difficult working conditions and who have very few leisure or no leisure at all, most people in the Western world, except those who have really a large family to take care of, etc., but most people, they have leisure, especially the young or the elderly who are retired, and they have the opportunity to study all topics because there are conferences, there are lectures, articles made available, but a lot of people, they are simply not interested. The debate, that's just an illustration, the debate between Zizek and Peterson of 2019. There are many others. Peterson, he makes great discussions with a lot of very good scientists, but Zizek and Peterson, they have kind of a status of mainstream intelligent intellectuals, right wing and left wing, I simplify. Any person who speaks English with a few hours of leisure, they can watch an interesting debate, and there are many others with different intellectuals, but they can watch interesting debates between intellectual heavyweights, one might say, and very few people in the history of the world have had this opportunity. And I'm aware of this because the overwhelming majority of my time is dedicated to gathering knowledge, either for work or for leisure. Yeah. And here, television, it's obsolete in a way. Once you have been unplugged by having access to knowledge produced on the internet. I'm not saying that everything is valuable or worthy of consideration, but all good ideas, they are on the internet, because in the mainstream media, no, intelligence is not allowed. Private, no, that's not private party, that will be you enter state-financed media area. Intelligence is not tolerated. Intelligent people will be prosecuted, trespassing the boundaries of a certain. If you speak too intelligently, you will be prosecuted. The media, they could have this at the front door of their TV of their TV show. Beware, listener or viewer. Intelligence will not be tolerated in our mainstream debates. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's an aspect of my autistic self, but for me, television, I don't understand why it even still exists. Yeah. Also, an idea that I had yesterday. Actually, no, it's just a way of formulating the idea. But the politicians of all countries, they act as if the people, or whatever people, is valid for every politician of every country, the people and their resources, physical, monetary, or intellectual, was their property. But precisely from a simple scientific viewpoint, the cosmos belongs to everyone, and knowledge belongs to everyone. So here I just make an illustration. The Chinese people, they are in a way the property of the Chinese government, like every other people, resources to be more or less exploited, but as parts of the cosmos. But it's true for every people, for the Americans, for the Nigerians, the Bolivians, the Brazilians. The laws of the universe, one might say, they apply to all, everywhere. They are not necessarily known, and here only predominantly Anglo-Saxon countries with free institutions historically have been able to discover the laws. It began in Italy. It's not an Anglo-Saxon country, but it began in Italy during the Renaissance with Galileo, symbolically, but then the institutions of England, which were then imitated by France and eventually by most other Western countries, and then most countries throughout the world, parliamentary separation, parliamentary monarchy, or parliament, separation of power, liberalism in a classic sense. The liberal societies, not the modern liberal insanity, the classical ideal of individualism, political individualism. It favors the scientific enterprise and scientific investigations, the pursuit of knowledge. So those societies, they tend to become more aware of the laws which govern the cosmos at all levels, physics, chemistry, biology, but then psychology, sociobiology, economics, sociology, politics, etc., etc. And that's why a way of formulating this is that Mr. Per Bylund, he understands the laws of economics much more than the overwhelming majority of economists, but also of the overwhelming majority of politicians and of most other people. That's why he's very important, but him as an individual, of course, but the people who share and understand his views, in a way, they are more, how should I explain this? What I'm trying to express is that the politicians, they think that they can interfere with the natural order. Here, natural doesn't mean nature, it means the rational order of reality. But here I have to be dialectical in the sense that the politicians of all countries, they are an expression of natural force in a way, psychological, economic, the will to dominate, the will to acquire resources, to secure stability in a way, because they think that through bureaucratic legislation you can stabilize, etc., etc. The politicians, most of them are corrupt, but not all of them. There are those who have good intention, who have integrity, honesty, etc. But the politicians, political will, in a way, which is a form of the will to power expressed in interpersonal social relation through the enactment of legislation to gain the social dominance, one might say, it's an expression of universal forces as well. Yeah. So they do not have to be left out of the picture, but simply they are much less conscious of all the laws, not only in economics, sociology, demographics, biology, and the physical laws of physics, etc. They are much less conscious usually because, yeah, so, yeah. That's why, in a way, science, in a way, that's one way of talking, science is egalitarian and communist in a way, because the minds of all thinking men can be equalized through science, because the scientific truth is true for everyone, and knowledge, when it is being shared, becomes de facto public property. That's why I mean when I say that I am partly a communist, but I'm not a centralist, centralized bureaucratic communist, but simply because a scientist, in a way, he's some sort of a communist, because not in a classical sense, in a sense that knowledge, when it is being shared, it becomes publicly available to all, potentially. And knowledge does not belong to any given scientist, it belongs to the cosmos, because it's the consciousness, it's the self-consciousness of the cosmos. Yeah. Here I think about Mr. Blinken, I think a Secretary of State of the US, about the balloon incident with the Chinese. Well, probably the Chinese are spying on the US are spying on China and on every other country, probably as well. But the US government is spying on the US citizen, and here that's much more wrong morally than either spying onto other countries or being spied upon by other countries, because these are kind of the rules of the game in a way between nations to spy onto one another, but the United States government is not supposed to spy on its own people. No government, ideally, but the US government, they have a higher moral obligation. And so yeah, but also through the internet, the very medium that the internet is, anyone can spy, but it's not spying, it's just scientific investigation, consciously or unconsciously, anyone can spy on everyone else. That's the global village, because the totality of world knowledge is made available. And here, a little bit of trash talking against the Anglo-Saxons. All they care about is economics, money, infrastructure, etc. But here, that's my German self. The movement of spirit, the circulation of ideas, and the development of consciousness is more important than the statistics of the Anglo-Saxon concerning the economy or the infrastructures, because eventually these are society is determined by human action. Mises would agree. A human action, which is purposeful behavior, is determined by consciousness. Yeah. We live in an age where anyone can spy on most other countries, except those who are really restricted, like North Korea, etc. But most other countries, if you speak the language, you can. It's not spying, but you can observe the development of ID while having access to the facts. Here, the CIA, they provide a fact book. Yeah, so. Yeah. Here also, I thought about this yesterday. It's just a new way of formulating ideas that I already had, but yeah, I talked about the politicians believing that the people is their property that they can exploit unabashedly. I don't know, here that's too complicated a word. There's a word that I have in mind, but I don't know exactly. Yeah, but the people, here that's really advanced thinking. The people, most people, they think in terms of the nation state. But the nation state is becoming obsolete because here, let us take the example of Ron Paul. Or Jeff Deist. Yeah. Ron Paul, in a way, he's not only an American treasure. Here's a good joke. I've discovered that Mr. Deist was kind of in the crew, member of the staff of Ron Paul. So, yeah, here's the good joke. Ron Paul is an American treasure, and Jeff Deist, guess what? He's Secretary of Treasure. I'm not sure that it's a good joke because that's an expression, Secretary of Treasure. I think that's an official job, but yeah, if a joke has to be explained, that's the proof that it's not really funny. But yeah, because Jeff Deist was the Secretary of Ron Paul, and I'm not sure that it's empirically true, but you get the idea. Well, let's skip this embarrassing joke. It's not embarrassing, but yeah, it sounded better in my mind. Yeah, so Ron Paul, of course, is an American treasure, but because his ideas are universal, although they developed and they still develop in a predominantly American context, but they are universal nonetheless, because UPS. So Ron Paul, he does not belong only to the Americans, he belongs to everyone. And that's true for every intelligent person, one might say. That's why the nation state, people who think in terms of nation state, it's a mental prison in a way. Because here Jeff Deist would agree. The nation state has become obsolete in a way. I understand why people, they have a psychological need to identify with a historically an entity with a historical background, etc., etc. But here, that's anti-nationalism trash talking. Most nation states are artificial. In Africa, most of states are completely artificial. In Asia, a lot of states are historically kind of artificial. They are the byproduct of colonization or colonization and decolonization, and other ideological struggles, religious and political conflicts. In Europe, where the nations have a much longer historical time span in a way, but not as nation states, Italy and Germany. Italy is not really a nation, because the Italians, they might be unified by language, but they are very diverse ethnically. I'm talking about the historical Italians. The Germans, they are unified by language, but they are also partly ethnically diverse among the native historical German population. The Germans of the 20th century, they knew this, of course. Lothrop Stoddard knew this as well. The Germans of the north and the Germans of the south, they are ethnically heterogeneous in a way. Yeah. Yeah, but France in the long term, it's some sort of an artificial nation as well. Yeah, there are a lot of Poland. Well, it's complicated because they have been dismantled, reassembled over and over. But this is one of the problems with Ukraine, the legitimacy or not, depending on who says what, of the unity of ethnicity, the unity of culture, the unity of language. Do you have to obey cultural affiliations, political affiliations, etc., etc.? These are Spain, in a way. It's also there are ethnic and cultural divisions within Spain, between the north, the Catalonia and centralized bureaucracy in Madrid, in Belgium, etc., etc. Here, the libertarians, they are clear-minded, because the ideal and the idea of the nation state is really obsolete. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so Ron Paul, that's just an illustration. Ron Paul is not only an American hero in the modern day, but an American jewel, but he's a universal jewel. Because the problems of the Fed, Ron Paul talks about much more than the Fed or the corrupt bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., but the problems created by the Fed, they are in a way more or less universal, because everything is interconnected economically, financially, etc., etc. That's why here the thinking in terms of nation state is really limiting, and it's blurring. It blurs the mind. A centralized government cannot solve problems, it can only create problems. Yeah. That's why people, when they talk about geopolitics, they categorize entities, they put in boxes by the categories of nation states, but there are division and conflicts within all nation states, and that's why putting talking about Germany, England, the US, France, or even China, Russia as one unified box. I understand why it helps, and I use these words, of course, to simplify, but actually it's not appropriate to simplify. It's not okay, but when it comes to talking seriously, there is no unity within most, if not all, modern nation states, especially in the West. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I've been talking for an hour. I'm done eating my breakfast. Now I will walk a little bit outside to take the rays of the sun, pick up the cigarette butts, participate in a local charity a little bit, read a little bit. That's part of my daily routine. That's part of my work. Actually, I need, in order to be productive, I need to gather information. So I will read a little bit. Then I intend to produce a video. I have to take care of my singular self as well. Order my room because I have bring a little bit of disruption by recording a video yesterday. I have to find a new opportunities. Not find, but search for new opportunities. I have a lot of things to do. But distribute books also. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know when this video will be published because as I speak now, we are the 22nd of April. There are at least almost 10 videos about these kind of morning talks or lunch talks programmed ready to be published. Usually there's broadly a 2-week time span between the moment it is recorded and the moment that it is published. I've decided to publish one video each day on either on my various channels. Not one video each day on each channel, but to publish one videos using various channels. So I don't know when this will be published, but good ideas, when they are true and good, they do not get old. Yeah. So it will be published at some moment. Yeah, that's what I thought during my breakfast today. Yeah.